My spouse freaked out when I informed him I was expecting. Everything was damaged by you. This child was not what I wanted. He packed his belongings and headed out for his young coworker that same evening. His parents helped him. I was abandoned. However, years later, he clawed his way back to me. Chad and I have been wed for 4 years, for 7 together. We had discussed starting a family at some point, but we never gave it a specific date. While on birth control, I experienced a gastrointestinal ailment approximately 3 months ago. Okay, birth control and antibiotics don't usually get along. I didn't give it much thought when I initially missed my period. I've always had a somewhat erratic cycle, particularly under stress. Additionally, the work had been especially taxing. However, I purchased a pregnancy test during my lunch break after I began to feel queasy in the mornings and realized my breasts were particularly sore. 2 lines of pink, as clear as day. Over the next 2 days, I took 3 additional tests. Everything is good. I was surprised, both excited and scared. After the first shock subsided, I began to envision our future together as a family, even though I knew it wasn't planned. Though the timing wasn't ideal, I always dreamed of becoming a mother. And I believed that once Chad recovered from the initial shock, he would change his mind. I wanted to plan the ideal occasion, so I waited a week before telling him. I had no intention of making a grandiose announcement on Instagram, complete with confetti and letterboards. We're not like that. Instead, I bought a bottle of his favorite bourbon for him and some sparkling cider for myself, and I prepared his favorite dinner lasagna with garlic toast. Even the blue outfit he usually says I look good in was on me. Even though it wasn't planned, I wanted it to be unique. I continued practicing how I tell him while I was cooking. Should I tell it directly? Tell a joke. After supper, I decided on something straightforward. Our lives will change as a result of the news I have. Around 7 o'clock, Chad arrived home later than usual. He appeared preoccupied, continually looking at his phone. Not out of the ordinary these days. He and his team have been working on a major project. Before I could even mention the momentous occasion during dinner, he poured himself a large drink of bourbon and said something about it looking excellent, scarcely noticing the nice cuisine. When I tried to talk to him, he was silent and would only answer with a single word. I inquired about his day, his project, or anything else to start a discussion, but he either shrugged or responded sparingly. I attributed the strange feeling to work-related stress. I inhaled deeply and stretched across the table for his hand after we had finished our meal. Chad, I recall exactly what I said. I'm expecting a child. The ensuing quiet seemed to last for hours. A range of emotions passed across his face, pale and blank, followed by something I had never seen before. Panic mingled with anger. He inquired as to whether I was kidding when he eventually spoke. I told him that I hadn't been taken for tests. The situation rapidly got out of control. What he said next is something I will never forget. Everything was damaged by you. This child was not what I wanted. I made an effort to clarify that it was an accident. Most likely because my birth control was hampered by the antibiotics. Like we always did with other problems, I believed we could work it out together. He dropped the bomb at that point. Maybe perhaps he had no desire to have children. It was always merely a hypothetical future to him, but he said he only agreed to my someday dreams to keep me happy. Before he even acknowledged it, his response to my question about whether there was anyone else told me everything. He eventually admitted under pressure that he had been seeing Vanessa for a few months. He had cited Vanessa, a great coworker, who was contributing new ideas to the team. The person who was 24 years my junior. Chad began packing not just an overnight bag, but a suitcase full of clothing and necessities as I was still coming to terms with this double betrayal. What I was seeing was unbelievable. That same night, my husband was actually leaving me. I informed him of my pregnancy. He acknowledged that he was going to Vanessa's apartment for the time being when I asked where he was going. 30 minutes after I announced my pregnancy, Chad was waiting at our front door with his luggage and promised to return later with the rest of his belongings. I questioned him about whether he was really abandoning his pregnant wife like this. His answer, I am unable to be a father. I'm not prepared. No one is ever fully prepared for parenthood, as I mentioned, but that's just the way life is. He simply muttered, I'm sorry, and promised to call back in a few days. Then he vanished. As simple as that. I sat in our unexpectedly quiet apartment, trying to take in the situation. I was announcing my pregnancy 1 minute, and then my husband left me and our unborn child behind to go to his younger girlfriend's house. I sobbed so much that my dearest friend Julie could not understand me when I called her. She came over right away and held me while I sobbed and asked all kinds of questions about my marriage. I believed I knew him. How could I have been so wrong? I kept asking myself. The following morning, Julie was briefly asleep in the armchair next to me when I woke up on the couch. Before the nausea struck, reminding me that not only was my husband gone, but I was still very much pregnant, I thought it had all been a nightmare. Julie insisted that I eat something for the sake of the baby, so she prepared me tea and toast. My fingers strayed to my abdomen. In any case, this was still my child, Chad had decided. Throughout the day, I attempted to call Chad, but the call went directly to voicemail. By the afternoon, he had not responded to my text message, pleading with him not to ignore me. I was getting stronger, and the shock was beginning to give way to rage. To make my first pregnant appointment, I gave my gyne a call. With or without him, I was going to go forward. Rebecca, Chad's mother, called me that night. It was a quick yet insightful talk. She informed me that Chad had told them about the circumstances and advised me to wait as he was still too young to start a family. She dismissed my observation that he was 31 years old, stating that he was concentrating on his work. The real kicker came next. She implied that I ought to think about my choices, blatantly implying termination without saying it out loud. I made it clear to her that regardless of Chad's choice, I would keep this baby as her granddaughter. I was shivering with rage at the end of the call, finally realizing the origins of some of Chad's attitudes. His parents had always lavished him with attention and treated him as though he was infallible. The days that followed went so quickly. I felt like my world had fallen apart, but I tried to act normal when I went to work. To learn more about my alternatives, I spoke with a lawyer. I began reading up on childcare expenses and single parenthood. I examined my financial situation, figuring out how I could manage on my own if necessary. 3 days after leaving, Chad finally texted to let me know he was living at Vanessa's and would send money for bills, but not to check in or apologize. He said he wanted space and wasn't ready to chat when I responded that we needed to speak face to face. After a week, there were 2. Once, when I was at work, he stopped by the flat to pick up some more of his belongings, with a note stating that he had paid his rent for the upcoming month and will get in touch with me for a divorce. After consulting with a lawyer, he left his keys on the counter. Divorce, as simple as that. When the ultrasound technician performed my first prenatal visit by myself, I heard my baby's heartbeat for the first time. That whooshing sound, quick and rhythmic. I started crying. The technician most likely believed that they were tears of happiness rather than sorrow for the family, as I had assumed. The baby was exactly the appropriate size. A small printout of the ultrasound image was given to me, just a slight fuzz in shape, but already my kid. As a reminder that this small person was depending on me, regardless of what happened with Chad, I placed it on the refrigerator as soon as I arrived home. Roland, Chad's father, called me 3 weeks after Chad left. When I told him honestly that I wasn't doing well after being dumped for a younger woman, and that his wife had suggested an abortion, he at least inquired about my well-being, unlike Rebecca's icy demeanor. He made an effort to defuse the situation. He asserted that they were only worried about Chad's job and advancement chances, and that Rebecca didn't mean it that way. He emphasized that Chad simply isn't in a position where he can be a parent at this time, calling my pregnancy unfortunate timing. I told Roland that, although I hadn't anticipated becoming a single mother either, I don't handle unforeseen difficulties in life. He made it apparent that Chad needed to concentrate on his job, and that he and Vanessa were connected even though he offered financial assistance. I made a significant realization when I hung up. In this, I was completely alone. Vanessa was Chad's choice. He had been selected by his parents. Now it was just my baby and me. However, that insight was illuminating in some way. I was free to stop wondering. There was no need for me to expect that Chad would change his mind. I could begin making plans for my life, our lives without the burden of doubt. That evening, I informed Julie over the phone that I had to relocate. Our flat held too many memories. She offered her spot right away, till I found another location. I saw something strange as I surveyed the apartment we had shared. There was a glimmer of hope, not to make amends, though it was for the future that bridge was completely destroyed by fire. My future, the future of my child. It would be difficult whatever occurred next. I wasn't deluded about it. Divorce and being a single mommy. Restarting my life from the beginning. It wouldn't be simple. However, I was convinced of one thing. My kid wouldn't ever feel unwelcome. Not by me. And perhaps that would suffice. I have another appointment with the lawyer tomorrow to begin the divorce process. Chad believes he can simply leave. We'll investigate that. I'm not out, but I might be down right now. Not even close. The initial update. Whoa! It still amazes me that a year has passed since my last post. I want to start by saying thank you to everyone who left supportive and helpful comments. Even though I was unable to reply to every message, I still read them all. You have no idea how much your words meant in those gloomy times. Even though so much has transpired, it seems understated to write that line. Now I have a son, a real little person who is completely dependent on me. Tiago is his name. Even though he is just 8 months old, he is the greatest thing that has ever happened to me. I was folding his ridiculously little socks yesterday when I suddenly noticed something that stopped me cold. He is someone Chad has never met. Not once, not during his birth, not for his initial grin, for his first Christmas no. Never. The father of my son is a stranger to his own child and lives less than 30 minutes away. I suppose I ought to resume where I left off. My pregnancy lasted 7 months before the divorce was finalized. Chad didn't dispute anything, which accelerated the process according to my lawyer. Despite its irregularities, the judge's order of reasonable child support was based on Chad's income. Later, more on that. I got a smaller 2-bedroom apartment near Julie after leaving ours. It's in a good school district, which I've discovered is something you start thinking about far sooner than you'd imagine. But the rent is more than I'd like. With a pack and play bouncer and what seems like a tiny toy store blooming across my living area. My dining room has become half nursery. Marie Kondo's heart would stop beating. After 19 hours of labor, Tiago was born on a Tuesday evening. As I vowed I couldn't do it, Julie, my birthing partner, held my hand and gave me ice chips. I was tired of answering the nurse's questions about the father, so I just started stating that he wasn't in the photo, which seemed to be a huge understatement, but also true. Those initial weeks were a haze of breast agony and insomnia. Apologies, TMI. I was unsure whether I was doing something correctly. Tiago cried uncontrollably the night we got home, and I recall sitting on the floor of my bathroom at 3 a.m. crying too, and using my phone to search, "Why won't baby sleep?" as he moaned in my arms. We made it through, but I had never felt so alone or so overwhelmed. Together, Tiago and I worked it out day by day. His cries were known to me. To be hungry is not the same as being tired, which is not the same as wanting to be held. He loved to be sang to, I found out, notwithstanding my inability to carry a tune in a bucket. I observed the gradual emergence of his individuality. He has a giggle that can light up the entire room, is perceptive, headstrong, and I wonder where he gets that from. The work has been challenging. I needed the money, so I returned when Tiago was 10 weeks old. Surprisingly, my boss, Anastasia, has allowed me to work from home 2 days a week. Finding childcare almost ruined me both emotionally and financially. For many of us, childcare is more expensive than our rent, which seems completely absurd. Even though I've located a house that doesn't require a second mortgage, it still accounts for a sizable portion of my monthly income. One of the most challenging aspects has been the financial aspect. Chad occasionally pays child support, but when it does, there's always an excuse. His vehicle required maintenance. He had unforeseen costs. He is changing jobs. He and Vanessa were in Spain last month, so it was 2 weeks late. Before he even bothered to reply to my texts on the unaccounted payment, I saw the photos on Instagram. Speaking of social media, a few months after Tiago was born, I erred by looking at his profiles. There they were at a rooftop bar. Chad and Vanessa looked relaxed and sun-kissed. There are no indications of restless nights or garments soiled by spitting in their world. After that, I blocked them both. It's better for my mental health, according to Julie. She is correct. Julie has been my savior during this entire ordeal. When I'm too tired to cook, she comes over with takeout. Never once complains when I can only talk about baby poop and holds Tiago while I take a real shower. Regressions in sleep or consistency. When I was 8 months pregnant, she even planned a tiny baby shower. After I was ghosted by all of Chad's buddies. It's funny how people choose sides so easily. The parents of Chad have been fascinating. Once Tiago was born, they changed their minds after first supporting their son's decision to leave his pregnant wife. About a month after his arrival, Rebecca texted me to ask to see their grandson. I took a moment to consider my feelings before responding. Next came baby clothes, flowers, and even a handwritten letter expressing their desire to be involved in their grandson's life. When Tiago was 4 months old, I at last consented to a brief visit. To put it mildly, it was embarrassing. He looked much like Chad as a newborn, Rebecca kept saying, while Roland snapped about 50 pictures with his phone. They discussed establishing a college fund and brought pricey baby presents. They never once apologized for their prior actions or brought up their son's disappearance. I had to set a firm boundary when they requested to keep him overnight. I couldn't let my baby go anywhere without me, particularly when there were others who essentially advised me to end my pregnancy a year sooner. That was a bad conversation. Given that Chad had shown no desire in meeting his kid, Rebecca's accusation that I had used Tiago to punish Chad was a strong one. I'm still struggling to understand that section. How can you be aware of having a child and still not give a damn? I'm curious about their appearance, growth, and happiness. Chad has occasionally contributed money, but has never requested a visit, a picture, or a video. To him, Tiago appears to be an intangible idea rather than a living being with eyes and a dimpled chin. I have attempted to be the more mature one. I texted Tiago's birth statistics and a picture as soon as he was born. No answer. I occasionally post photos to a shared photo album I've set up online. In case Chad is ever interested in seeing what he's been missing, I don't believe he's ever opened it. I mailed a holiday card featuring Tiago's picture to Chad's address for his first Christmas. The envelope was returned with the label, "Return to Sender. Life continues in the interim." During his first month at daycare, Tiago contracted every sickness imaginable. No one forewarns you of this enjoyable surprise of parenthood, and it has subsequently strengthened its defenses. Now that he is crawling, he is putting everything in his mouth and pulling himself up on furniture. I have completely baby-proofed my place. It's been so long since I last saw my coffee table without corner protectors that I've forgotten what it looks like. My everyday activities have evolved into a meticulously planned, efficient dance. Get out of bed at 5:30 a.m. before Tiago takes a shower and puts on his clothes. By 7:15, get him clothed, fed, and up. Drop-off time for daycare is 8. Work until 5 o'clock. By 5:30, hurry to take him up. On days when meetings go longer than scheduled, paying the late fee. Dinner at home by 6 o'clock. Bedtime rituals and bath stories. After that, you have a few valuable hours to clean, do laundry, pay your bills, and possibly watch half of a Netflix program before dozing off on the couch. Repeat after rinsing. The hardest times are the ones that no one discusses, such as when Tiago's first fever struck at 3 in the morning, and I was the only one who could determine whether to take him to the emergency room or his use of the word mama. However, neither the childcare paperwork that requests the father's information nor the data in his language are relevant because that person does not exist in his universe. Additionally, I have to fill out both portions while writing in front of other parents. However, there are also lovely times. Hugs in the morning when he's up and chattering. When I pick him up from daycare, he grabs for me. The ceiling fan captivated him. His utter delight when splashing in the bathtub. His warm breath against my neck, the weight of his dozing off on my chest. I won't act like it's simple. The most difficult thing I have ever experienced is being a single parent. On some days, I feel quite exhausted. I place the cereal in the refrigerator and the milk in the cabinet. There are days when I lose my temper with customer service representatives over nothing because I'm exhausted. Because it's the only place Tiago can't hear me. There are days when I cry in the shower. However I'm doing it, we're going to do it. Ironically, I take pride in that. Next month will mark Tiago's first birthday. I'm planning a small celebration with Julie's help. Not very fancy. A cake, a couple of friends, and possibly more decorations than are necessary because Julie obsesses over Pinterest. After our most recent conversation, I considered inviting Chad's parents, but ultimately decided against it. They still periodically text him to ask to see him, but they never acknowledge the fact that their son has abandoned his child. It's always on their terms. I'm not waiting for a card, much less an appearance from Chad himself. The last I heard, he and Vanessa moved in together and got a dog through common acquaintances. That must be the amount of responsibility he can handle. Last week was the worst. At last, I received approval for a little flat in a marginally better neighborhood. It's not very fancy, but the schools are good, and Tiago can play in the small yard. A text buzzed through my phone as I was signing the lease. Rebecca sent it stating that they wished to invite their grandchild to their upcoming family reunion. A picture of Chad and Vanessa, with their arms wrapped around one another and beaming, was included in the text. I spent a lot of time looking at that picture. Chad was there grinning and going about his business, as like his son didn't exist. In that instant, something changed within me. Not rage. That's right. However, there is still a lot of that. Clarity, more precisely. For the past year, I've been waiting for Chad to take the initiative and show even the tiniest interest in his child. Sending updates into the void for a year. Despite everything, a year of striving to be fair and reasonable. I responded to Rebecca's text. Tiago will not be there. Chad knows how to get in touch with me if he wants to meet his son. However, I'm tired of defending him or acting as though his absence wasn't intentional. I blocked her after that. Second place. That may sound harsh, but I'm done trying to keep Chad's feelings and reputation safe. He can live without consequences, and I'm done bearing the full emotional burden. For Tiago's sake, I'm done acting as though his father may suddenly show interest in him. In all honesty, we would be better off without someone who could just up and leave. Tiago deserves to be surrounded by people who pick him, support him, and love him without conditions. I can't make Chad be that way. So here we are. A single mother and her son are up against the world a year later. I didn't plan this life, not even close. However, I came to a significant realization tonight while staring at Tiago's sleeping face. You may not always end up with the family you had anticipated. However, it remains flawless in its own unique manner. I have no idea what the future will bring. At the time, it seemed like a joke, but the divorce settlement contained a language regarding re-examining custody if Chad ever decides he wants to be involved. However, my lawyer emphasized that it was normal for me to hope he would never return. One more small component. I'm still in shock that he doesn't want to know about his wonderful son. I'm concentrating on what I can control for the time being. Constructing a secure house, establishing joyful recollections. I'm doing my best to be both a parent, and I might one day figure out how to trust people again. However, that will be an issue for Melissa in the future. Melissa needs to go to bed and do the wash right now. Regardless of my readiness, Tiago will be up at 6 in the morning. That concludes my update. A lovely baby boy in a year. One day at a time, too. The second update. My last update was 4 years ago. To be honest, I never imagined that I would be posting here again. However, I had to write about something that happened yesterday since I can't stop thinking about it. Last month, Tiago celebrated his 5th birthday, 5. It still amazes me that my small baby has grown into this talkative kindergartner who can correct my pronunciation of dinosaur names and knows the order of all the planets. Time is crazy. His first day of kindergarten was yesterday. Anticipating the typical pandemonium of drop-off, I took the morning off from work to walk him in. I was surprised to see Leroy, a friend of Chad's, dropping off his kid in the school parking lot. Tiago was pulling my hand as I momentarily froze, looking forward to seeing the classroom. So, after I got Tiago comfortable, I forced myself to do it. I only shed a few tears, not him. Leroy came up to me as I was making my way back to my car. Instead of making me feel uncomfortable, he simply inquired about my well-being. He revealed the secret when we were grabbing coffee at the store across from the school. 6 months ago, Chad and Vanessa called it quits. He was still claiming he wasn't ready, but it seemed she wanted children. She finally gave him an ultimatum at the age of 35 after he had been dragging her along for years. And he made a wise choice, not her. Chad has been having trouble finding steady employment since his firm downsized last year. Leroy claims that while Vanessa maintains the apartment they shared, he has been sleeping on friends' couches. His ideal existence, for which he left us, has utterly collapsed. While sitting there, I stirred my coffee. I'm not sure how to feel. He wasn't satisfied or served at the appropriate time, as I would have thought years before. It was just an odd void. Similar to learning about a character from a television program I've stopped watching for years. The biggest realization for me was how drastically my life has changed after Chad left. After years of balancing employment and being a single mother, finally, things are stable. After 6 years of employment, Anastasia elevated me to senior project manager last year. I was finally able to purchase a modest townhouse in a reputable school area thanks to the rise. It's ours, nothing fancy. We have a small garden where we produce tomatoes that never quite work out, and Tiago's handprint is painted on the wall of his bedroom. It took a lot of effort to achieve financial stability. Spreadsheets and budget calculations weighing every expense took up many evenings. Around Diego's 3rd birthday, Chad finally stopped paying child support altogether. I filed with the enforcement agency after several missed payments. It was like chasing a phantom, though, because Chad had changed employment so frequently. I ultimately concluded that the strain of battling for it was not worth it. I would rather Tiago see me composed, and in the moment, than agitated and worried about money we could live without. About a year ago, the question I've been dreading began to come up. Why don't I have a father figure? While we were shopping for groceries, Tiago inquired. Totally unexpected. I had been ready for this. Nothing can prepare you for staring into those innocent eyes, even if you read articles on age-appropriate explanations. I gave him a condensed version of the reality, which was that his father wasn't prepared to have children. However, that does not imply that Tiago was inherently flawed, that adults occasionally make decisions that harm others. However, my love and desire for him was sufficient for 2 parents. It's never easy to have those conversations. Every time Tiago sees a father-son activity at school or another child at the park with their father, I feel a little heartbreak. However, we have established our own customs. His favorite Aunt Julie continues to teach him card tricks and host movie evenings. Every month, my parents go up to spend the weekends with their grandchild. Even without Chad, our village still exists. Then, at a parent-teacher conference at Tiago Preschool, approximately 10 months ago, an unexpected event occurred. I kept seeing this nice-eyed guy wearing a bad dad joke t-shirt. I'm not debating, I'm merely stating my position. Tiago had made friends with his daughter Emma, who was enrolled in his class. I heard him handle her tantrum about having to leave the classroom in a calm yet stern manner. I was interested in toys and something about his patience. Emma's widower father, Douglas, uses dinosaur-shaped pepperoni to cook handmade pizza every Friday. Without being reminded, do you recall his Teacher Appreciation Week? Doesn't mind Amaison's incessant space talk. Playdates were the beginning. It made sense because the children were already pals. After coffee while kids were playing, we texted each other about the announcements at school that we had both missed. After that dinner, Tiago and Emma's soccer practice one evening was delayed. After the children had gone to sleep, there were more dinners, texts, and discussions that continued late into the night. Douglas was never hurried. The combo bargain made sense to him. Tiago and I always. After learning about Tiago's space phase, he inquired intelligently about his hobbies, including reading books about stars. He repaired Tiago's swaying bike seat the first time without being asked. The sheer compassion of it almost brought me to tears. After 6 months, Douglas told me about Emma's mother dying of cancer when she was only a year old, how he was afraid of parenting a daughter by himself, and how he had stored her mother's pictures all over the place so Emma would know her. I trusted him in a manner I hadn't trusted anyone in years because of the unvarnished honesty of his love and suffering. Officially, we have been dating for 7 months. The children appear genuinely delighted about our combined playdates and are aware that we are special pals. Douglas and I discussed the direction of this last month. Just sitting on my back patio after the kids had gone to sleep, nothing spectacular. He wants to proceed with us openly discussing our aspirations and anxieties. I also do. We're going slowly. However, I'm letting myself imagine a future with someone once more for the first time in 5 years. In the meantime, Tiago has unexpectedly rekindled Chad's parents' interest. Rebecca contacted last month to ask if they might take him for a weekend, after years of sending each other random texts and occasionally giving him gift cards on his birthday. She became defensive and said they had always desired a relationship, but believed I was keeping them apart when I told her it wouldn't happen after years of little communication. Actually, until lately, they hardly put out any effort. I wonder whether their sudden interest is related to Chad moving back in with them. Last week, Douglas requested whether he and Emma could go fishing with Tiago the following weekend. Something so basic, but it tightened my throat, observing Tiago's enthusiasm for learning how to fish like a true boy. For the first time in years, I looked at Chad's Instagram after Leroy's disclosure yesterday. Vague motivational sayings about fresh starts and self-discovery have taken the place of his meticulously manicured stream of far-flung getaways and rooftop parties. The fact that the sun is only a few miles distant is not mentioned. I feel strangely calm as I close the app. I was scared broken and alone 5 years ago. Today, I have a partner who picks us every day, a career I'm proud of, a home I own, and an incredible child who amazes me every day. He wants to do it not because he has to. 5 years later, I'm still there. It's exactly where I meant to be, not where I expected to be. Chad, too. His decisions took him in the exact direction that they would inevitably take him. I no longer even have the capacity to harbor resentment. It seems like a different timeline throughout that period of my life. When I left a long time ago, last Saturday's third update began like any other pancake breakfast, then hurrying to the soccer match in Tiago. Douglas pushed me when we were snuggled beneath an umbrella watching the blue lightning. "Do you recognize that person?" to Chad across the fields. For the first time in 7 years, my ex-husband was simply watching our son play soccer. Nothing, not even a heads-up text or warning. Tiago rushed over for water at halftime. I'm thrilled with his defensive performance. At that moment, I saw Chad coming toward us. When Tiago saw him, he inquired as to the identity of the stranger. Chad was standing there, clumsily remarking on Tiago's size before I could respond. I approached Chad and sent Tiago back to his team. He acknowledged that his mother had brought up the soccer schedule. Naturally, Rebecca. Now it made sense why his parents had suddenly increased their communication. When Douglas identified himself, I saw Chad wince a little when he said he was Tiago's father. I merely gave him a biological correction. Chad asked if we could talk after the game after a few heated exchanges. I grudgingly consented to spend 20 minutes at the local coffee shop. While I met with Chad, Douglas took Emma and Tiago out for Victory ice cream. He didn't realize I had switched to lattes a year prior, so he had ordered me a cappuccino, a minor detail that somehow brought the extent of the alteration to light. Chad's story was fragmented. A year and 8 months of therapy. Sober. After splitting with Vanessa, he returned to live with his parents. The most startling revelation was that he had genuinely urged his parents to cut off communication with Tiago because he was unable to bear the thought of what he had left behind. He now desired to know his son and put things right. I made it clear to him that Tiago was a person with feelings and a life that Chad was unaware of, not the infant he had walked out on. He understood that he couldn't simply be a father, then inquired about my connection to Douglas. When I informed him that Douglas had been a better father than he had ever been, a look of pain appeared on his face. I consented to think about holding a meeting under rigorous supervision. I would be there. It would be short. And that was it if he vanished once more. Forever. I set up a meeting in a park 3 days after speaking with Douglas and our family therapist. It was more difficult than I thought to tell Tiago. His inquiries were devastating. Why, in order to find out if his biological father would approve of him and whether Douglas would accompany him, his father wanted to visit him right away. Since he knows I'm skilled at soccer, he chose to wear his jersey. It wasn't a bad meeting. As I observed from a distance, they constructed the Lego soccer field set that Chad provided. I observed genetic resemblances. The same concentration face had slipped my mind. When they grinned, the same eye crinkled. We held a number of such supervised meetings over the course of the following 2 weeks. Subsequently, Chad contacted and requested to take Tiago to a movie by himself. I declined right away. 7 years versus 3 weeks. Not taking place. He suggested that the 3 of us go instead, as if he accepted this. Before I could reply, he unexpectedly arrived at our place with his parents. Chad muttered that he told them this wasn't the way, but Roland and Rebecca continued their conversation about going forward as a family. Chad requested to talk to me alone after I sent them home. He dropped it at that point. Melissa, I still adore you. I didn't stop. It was breathtakingly audacious. He said that even if I was seeing Douglas, we ought to think about becoming Tiago's biological parents again, since our son deserved the opportunity. I said I needed to ponder, so I asked him to go. I informed Douglas about Chad's declaration when he arrived downstairs. Douglas's worry that Chad might be Tiago's biological father was obvious. I told him, however, that I was right where I wanted to be. Chad texted again that evening to confirm that he meant what he had said about wanting to spend more time with our family. I felt a strange mixture of pity and rage as I gazed at those words. I would never be able to trust the man again after he abandoned me when I most needed him. I'll give Chad a call tomorrow to establish clear guidelines regarding his involvement in Diego's life as a biological father and not as my partner. Bridges have burned in the past, remain there.